Welcome to this deep dive where we are going to be exploring Baidu,
Okay.
a company that many people will know for its search engine, but is now really making a serious push into the world of AI.
Yeah.
So to guide us in this deep dive, we've got two sources.
Okay.
One is Baidu's official press release for their Q4 and full year 2024 results.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is an independent stock analysis. And both of these are hot off the press as of February 18, 2025.
Wow.
So what is the big story here?
I think the key takeaway is that Baidu's transition to an AI-first company is more than just talk.
Okay.
They're backing it up with serious action, and we're seeing that in a number of ways.
So where should we start with all this? What's catching your eye?
Well, Baidu's CEO, Robin Li, called 2024 a pivotal year in their AI transition.
Interesting.
He specifically pointed to the growth they're seeing in AI cloud as a major driver of revenue outside of their traditional online marketing business.
So AI cloud, that makes sense. I mean, as people and businesses rely more and more on AI, a company like Baidu is in a good position to be providing those cloud services.
Absolutely. They have the infrastructure, the expertise, and as we can see from the numbers, they're already seeing results.
Like what kind of results?
Well, their autonomous ride-hailing service, Apollo Go,
Right.
provided over 1.1 million rides just in the last quarter of 2024.
1.1 million? That's a lot of rides.
It is, and that's a 36% increase compared to the year before. So it shows a pretty serious commitment to AI.
Yeah.
And it gets even more impressive when you consider that they just launched fully driverless operations across China just this month in February 2025.
Fully driverless across China. That's incredible.
It really is. Think about the scale of that. A country as vast and complex as China going fully driverless. It's a testament to how far they've come.
Yeah, they seem to be not just keeping up with the competition, but really setting the pace in some ways.
I would agree with that.
But what about the financial side of things? Are they seeing the same success in their numbers?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. Overall revenue for the fiscal year 2024 is down slightly, about 1%, totaling 133.1 billion RMB, which translates to roughly 18.24 billion US dollars.
Okay, so a slight dip overall. Where is that coming from?
Primarily their online marketing revenue. That's been their traditional stronghold, but it's facing some headwinds.
I see.
However, the good news is they are making up for it with the strong growth we talked about in AI cloud and other non-online marketing areas. So there is a very clear shift happening in their revenue streams.
It sounds like they're successfully navigating a changing market, but is that 1% decline something that should concern investors?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The independent stock analysis suggests that Baidu might actually be undervalued by the market right now.
Undervalued, how so?
Well, despite that dip in revenue, Baidu remains profitable.
Okay.
They recorded a net income of $3.26 billion for fiscal year 2024.
Right.
It's also worth noting that their Q4 operating income took a hit due to some one-time factors like expected credit losses and inventory write-downs.
So like accounting adjustments?
Exactly, not necessarily reflecting the core health of the business.
Got it. So what else does this analysis point to?
Well, they're looking at Baidu's valuation ratios.
Okay.
Specifically, their price-to-earnings ratio, or PE ratio, is currently at 11.75 trailing and 9.83 forward.
For those of us who don't speak fluent stock market, what does that tell us?
Essentially, it's a way to compare a company's stock price to its earnings.
Okay.
And a lower PE ratio can often suggest that a company might be undervalued, meaning its stock price is low relative to how much money they're actually making.
Interesting.
And in Baidu's case, that low PE ratio combined with their price-to-book ratio of 0.92, it's definitely raising eyebrows.
So based on these numbers, the experts are saying that Baidu stock should actually be higher.
It seems that way. And there's another piece of the puzzle. Baidu has a remarkably strong balance sheet. They're sitting on a net cash position of $6.59 billion.
That's a lot of financial firepower.
It is.
So are they using that to, reward investors through things like dividends?
Interestingly enough, Baidu is not currently paying dividends.
Okay.
Their focus is on buybacks, essentially repurchasing their own stock and reinvesting in strategic areas like AI. Their recent buyback yield was around 1.37%.
So they're betting on themselves, putting their money where their AI is.
It seems so. It's a bold strategy, for sure.
It does seem to be paying off, at least for now. But I imagine there are also some challenges that they're facing. No company has a perfect run, especially in the fast-paced world of tech.
You're absolutely right. Both sources acknowledge there are some hurdles that Baidu will need to clear, and those are definitely worth exploring because they could have a significant impact on their future.
All right, let's get into those challenges. What are we talking about here?
Well, the first one is the regulatory landscape in China. It's been getting increasingly complex for tech companies.
Right.
And then there's the fierce competition they're facing, not just within China, but globally. So those are the two big ones.
This is where things get even more interesting. I'm ready to unpack those challenges.
Let's do it.
So let's dive into those challenges. You mentioned the regulatory landscape in China is getting more complex for tech companies. What's going on there, and how is it impacting Baidu?
Well, over the past few years, we've seen the Chinese government tightening its control over the tech sector,
Right, right.
and they've introduced new regulations around data privacy, antitrust issues, even content control online. And they haven't been shy about enforcing these rules, hitting some companies with really big fines.
Yeah, those penalties against companies like Alibaba and Tencent, I mean, those were huge. It makes you wonder how these moves are affecting a company like Baidu, especially with all their AI ambitions.
That's the key point. Baidu, with their search engine and push into AI, is right in the spotlight.
Hmm.
AI relies heavily on data to learn and improve, so any restrictions on how Baidu can collect and use data could have a direct impact on their AI development.
So navigating these data privacy regulations is absolutely crucial for them. What about antitrust concerns? Are those a factor too?
Oh, absolutely. Chinese regulators are very focused on trying to prevent monopolies and promote competition.
Right.
And given Baidu's size and influence in the search market, they need to be really careful not to use that dominance to stifle competition in other areas like AI or cloud services.
It's like they're playing a high-stakes game of chess, always having to think a few moves ahead to make sure they don't fall into any kind of regulatory trap.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of content control, which we touched on earlier.
Right.
China has very strict rules about what can be published online. So Baidu, as a major content provider, has to constantly make sure they're following those rules.
So what does that actually look like for them?
It means things like censoring search results, removing certain content, even closely monitoring user activity. It's a lot to manage.
Wow. Sounds like a constant juggling act.
It really is, and investors are watching these developments closely. Any misstep could lead to, fines, penalties, even restrictions on their operations.
So yeah, the regulatory situation in China adds a whole other layer of complexity to Baidu's story. It's like they're trying to innovate and grow, but they're also walking a tightrope.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
But let's not forget about that other big challenge you mentioned, competition. Who are they up against, and how intense is that battle?
It's a crowded field both in China and globally.
Okay.
In the search market, they're still the leader in China, but rivals like Sogu and Alibaba Shenhua are not far behind.
Right.
And when you look at AI and cloud services, it's a whole other game. They're facing giants like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, not to mention a bunch of ambitious Chinese startups.
Wow, that's a lot of competition. So how can they possibly keep up with all of those players?
It's tough, no doubt. All these companies are pouring billions of dollars into research and development, attracting the best talent, forming strategic partnerships. Baidu can't afford to just sit back and relax.
So what's their strategy? How do they plan to stay ahead?
They need to innovate, constantly adapt, and stay agile to maintain their edge.
Right.
And what about the autonomous driving space? We talked about their Apollo Go service earlier. How does the competition look there?
Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like autonomous driving is a battleground right now, with all sorts of companies vying for a piece of the self-driving pie.
Absolutely. You've got Tesla, Waymo, a whole wave of startups all making big claims. So how is Baidu positioning itself in all that?
Right. It seems like every week there's a new company claiming to have made some breakthrough.
It's true. So Baidu has a really interesting approach. They actually made their Apollo platform open source, which allows other companies to use it and even contribute to it.
Oh, wow. So they're embracing collaboration.
Exactly. By working with others, they're trying to amplify their impact and stay ahead in this rapidly evolving field.
So it's not just about competition, it's also about cooperation.
Right, but even with this collaborative approach, they're still going up against companies with huge resources and a global reach.
So we've got regulatory uncertainty in China, fierce competition in pretty much every market they're operating in. It paints a picture of a company facing some pretty serious headwinds. But earlier you mentioned that the stock analysis suggested Baidu might still be a good bet for investors. How do they reconcile those two perspectives?
Well, the analysis acknowledges the risks, but also points to a few key reasons for optimism. They highlight Baidu's track record of innovation, their solid financials, and their clear focus on AI as reasons to believe they can overcome these challenges.
But how can investors weigh those risks against the potential rewards? It seems like a really tricky equation.
That's where it gets really interesting. We need to consider the bigger picture. What are the global trends shaping the tech industry? What are the long-term implications of AI's rise? How might China's role in the global economy evolve? These are big questions with no easy answers.
It sounds like we need to zoom out a bit, see where Baidu fits into the grand scheme of things.
You got it. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about Baidu's plans for AI, their finances and the challenges they're up against, both in China and globally. Now, I'm kind of curious about the bigger picture. Where does Baidu fit into all of this, and what might their future look like?
I think the question really is, can Baidu become a global AI powerhouse? A name that rival the likes of Google and Microsoft.
It's a bold idea for sure, but from what we've talked about, they seem to be taking some pretty big steps in that direction. I mean, they have the resources, the talent, and they're pushing boundaries in areas like autonomous driving. But you mentioned the broader context is important here. What are those big forces at play that could really shape where Baidu ends up?
Well, one of the biggest is China's expanding role in the global economy. I mean, they're already a major player, and their influence is only going to grow. So this gives companies like Baidu a certain advantage, in a
A
sense.
home field advantage.
Yeah, exactly. But it also comes with some unique challenges.
What do you mean?
China's political system and regulatory environment are very different from, say, the US or Europe. And that difference can create friction, especially as Chinese companies try to expand internationally.
Yeah, we've seen that with companies like Huawei and TikTok facing pushback from governments in the US and Europe. So for Baidu to really make it on a global stage, they'll need to navigate all that.
Absolutely. It's not just about the technology, it's about building trust with governments and consumers outside of China.
Right.
And then there's the pace of change in the tech world itself, especially in AI. It's moving so fast.
Yeah, what's cutting edge today could be outdated tomorrow. So how can a company like Baidu make sure they don't get left behind in this constant race for innovation?
Well, they need to keep investing heavily in R&D, attract and retain top talent, and maybe most importantly, be really adaptable.
Adaptable, how so?
Be ready to, shift gears as new breakthroughs emerge and new trends take over. Be strategic about where they focus their energy.
Right, they can't try to do everything at once. It seems like they're doing that by zeroing in on areas like autonomous driving and AI cloud services. Are those the right bets to make?
I think those are smart choices. I mean, those are markets with huge potential, and Baidu has a realistic chance of becoming a leader in those spaces. It's about carving out their niche in the AI world,
Instead of trying to go head to head with like Google in areas where they're already dominant,
right? It's about finding their own path.
finding their strengths and, anticipating where the market is heading and being flexible enough to adjust to all the changes that are happening constantly in the AI world.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us back to the big question, will Baidu succeed? I guess only time will tell, but their journey will be fascinating to watch, and it could really have a big impact on the future of technology, not just in China, but for everyone.
That's a great point. So there you have it, folks, our deep dive into Baidu, a company with deep roots in the internet, but with their sights set on the future of AI.
It's an exciting time for them, for sure.
They're facing some real challenges, but they're also seizing some amazing opportunities. And their story is just getting started.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And remember, the world of tech never stands still. Stay curious, keep learning, and maybe you'll be the one to discover the next big thing.
Until next time.
Goodbye.